Andrew Huang. Today we're looking at the MiniBrute 2S that Arturia just released. They sent me this unit a couple weeks early to check out, and I have to say, it sounds amazing. I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm having a lot of fun. Included with the unit, you get the power supply, of course, you get 8 patch cables, you get this notebook of patches, and the manual's online, but you get this quick start guide, which, Arturia, I don't know why you needed to Ziploc this single sheet of paper. Let's see what this thing sounds like. So I'll give you a brief overview of what's going on here. Over here you have your analog synth section. This down here is the sequencer, and then up in this corner you have your modulation points. So you can use that to reconfigure the internal signal routings, or of course send signals back and forth with your other gear. So let's look at the synthesizer section. You've got all your basic waveforms, Arturia style, so the sawtooth has an ultra saw control, which just kind of thickens it up. The pulse wave gives you pulse width. That one's pretty standard. And then I really like Arturia's triangle waves because they've got this metallizer control. That's one of my favorite triangle waves. I don't know exactly what the metallizer control is doing, but it adds all these rich harmonics to the sound that just give it such a great timbre. You've also got noise, and you can just mix that in how you like to your sound. I should mention, I really love that they give you faders for a lot of these controls, which I think make more sense with faders than knobs. Though I do like the Arturia knobs too. They've got this 7-sided shape that, it's just cool. They feel good. There's a second more basic oscillator giving you a sine wave, a saw wave, and a square wave. And it can be tuned independently from the first oscillator, and it can also act as an LFO with this switch. Speaking of LFOs, there are 2 dedicated LFOs that each have 6 waveforms, and you can run them free or tempo synced. Pretty standard filter section giving you cutoff and release, and low pass, band pass, high pass, and notch filter types. And then also a pretty standard amplifier section. You've got your master volume, a global tune, so that controls both of the oscillators at once, and then an attack and decay envelope. The one Arturia unique thing about this is the brute factor knob. This is a control they designed to mimic what happens on some synthesizers when you feed the headphone output back into the external input. So it's kind of a weird oscillator feedback loop. It can lead to some really nice full saturation sounds, as well as just kind of unpredictable and noisier sounds as you turn it further. Of course, for that demonstration, I was not playing these notes, I was sequencing them. So let's talk about this sequencer. The big knob adjusts tempo, or if you hold shift, it adjusts swing. You've got 16 steps in front of you represented by these pads, and you can go up to 64 steps using these pages in conjunction with the last step button. So you can set the notes. You can set the gate length, so it's anywhere from super short and clicky to a tie, which connects it to the next note. And then they give you velocity and pressure, which you set the same way with these knobs. Or if you hold either of those 2 buttons down and you turn this big knob, you can select between a whole bunch of different types of sequencing. So instead of velocity or pressure, you can do 0 to 1 volts, 0 to 2 volts, 5 volts, 8 volts, some LFOs, sample and hold, and these are independent of the pitch and gate sequences. So you can set these to be different lengths. You can route them to whatever other gear you want using the patch points. So it's a really solid, easy to use sequencer. You can save a lot of patterns. I can't remember off the top of my head how many, but it's like more than I think I would ever need. And playing back your patterns in whatever order you want is super easy. You just hold chain and then press the pads that represent your patterns, and you can tap them multiple times in a row if you want them to repeat multiple times in a row, and then when you hit play, it'll play them in exactly the order that you just punched in. My favorite feature of Arteria sequencers, though, is this last step button. It makes it super simple to change your pattern lengths, anything between 1 and 64 steps, by pressing last step and then one of these pages, or last step and one of these step buttons, and the sequence will be as long as whatever active page or step you just hit. And I just think it's important when you're making music with machines that you have these ways that you can break out of that very rigid sort of multiple of fours grid that we all get used to. And even if you're not looking to do weird time signature stuff or polyrhythms, if you want to stick in 4/4, this is still really cool because you can set these independent modulation channels I was just talking about to their own length. So maybe you have a 4/4 synthesizer melody playing, but the modulation that's happening to it can be a lot more complex. You can have mod 1 at 13 steps and mod 2 at 7 steps, and it'll just be a much more complex interaction that doesn't repeat nearly as often. So here we have a 16-note sequence. But if I tap mod 1, you can see that that is only a 7-step sequence, and that is sending different envelope lengths to the amplifier. Mod 2 is a 13-step sequence, and that is sending a different value each step to the filter cutoff. So if I shorten that, let's try 3 steps. You can hear that 3-step pattern of the filter cutoff happening much more obviously. There are also some handy shift functions that they've built in. So this is the shift button, and when you hold it down, you can select between different sequence modes. So playing it forward, playing it in reverse, doing a pendulum, or playing at random. You can also choose if you want it playing back at quarter notes, 8th notes, 16th notes, or 32nd notes. And then there's a whole bunch of scales you can choose between, including a user-definable one, so you can customize that one. So let's talk about the modulation section now. I want to show you a jam I did accompanied by the MiniBrute for percussion. In it, I had a whole bunch of crazy self-modulation on the MiniBrute going on, and I just tried to get as weird with it as I could. I really wanted to try and push all the possible sounds out of this synthesizer. It's a 2-oscillator analog synthesizer with a multi-mode filter, so you know you're going to be able to get your usual analog bass sounds and lead sounds and acid sort of stuff. I wanted to see how different I could get it sounding. Also, MiniBrute users, you'll be interested to know, even though the form factor looks the same, the MiniBrute 2S is actually significantly bigger. Let's do a little comparison. Ooh. You can see the height difference here too. Ah. So this MiniBrute really is a beast. On to the Weirdo Jam. Now with all these patch points, this thing is just begging to play with some friends. So overall, I find this to be a pretty solid device. You get a great sounding analog synthesizer, you get a very powerful sequencer, and you get these 48 patch points, which I've barely scratched the surface of what's possible in terms of modulation in this video. There's so much you could do there. And with the limited time I've had with it so far, I haven't even explored the arpeggiator. I only have one real gripe with it, and it's not major, but it is a bit of a workflow annoyance. It's really easy to record your patterns in here. You can just play them or you can program them. I just wish there were a way where you could adjust a parameter on all steps at once. So if I've been messing with the note lengths and then I decide, nah, I don't like that, I just want to go back, I have to adjust each individual knob again to get it to where I want. And there were a few times I found myself wishing that I could just get all the velocities to maximum or all the gates to 50%. Other than that, I've been having a blast with this thing. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you'll subscribe and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. I'll be back again real soon with a new video.